Our world is only ever haunted.
What is the paranormal? The answer seems obvious. It's stuff like this. It's the kind of thing that defies explanation. And yet, when we see things like this, we offer explanations. We attribute what we witness to something. So what do we really mean when we talk about something being paranormal?
They're like 9 foot tall. They look like aliens to us. Big eyes, they have big eyes.
The mysterious object that fell from the sky, even the officers apparently saw that. The green glow of the alleged UFO is seen on this newly released body camera footage.
That's the question, right? That's the question that a lot of people assume that they have answers to. But it's the question that I want to explore more fully and try to develop an answer to. I have intuitions, I have hunches, and I have some guideposts that lead me in a particular trajectory. But I'm going to hazard an operational definition at the outset that I hope to refine over time. But first, I want to lay out what the paranormal is not. First, the paranormal is not woo-woo. James Randi, I think, is the first person who formulated that phraseology. And I'm still not exactly sure what he means by it, other than to suggest that if you think it's possible that hauntings are real, or Sasquatch, or whatever, that you're nuts, you're just irredeemably crazy. It's just a dismissive term. It feels a little silly calling woo-woo a term. So I'll just say sound. It's a dismissive sound to say, excuse me, only adults can be part of this conversation. You stay over there. We've already exposed the cracks in the myth of only kooks see this stuff, so we don't have to repeat that here. So, I mean, are there people who are cringingly buying into all manner of things with little in the way of corroboration, who are apt to believe anything outrageous or extraordinary at the drop of a hat, who are too quick perhaps to interpret what they experience in certain popular classifications of the weird and the haunting, etc.? Absolutely, yes. But does that mean that the phenomena themselves are utterly, at the core of their being, bereft of any rationality whatsoever? I gotta say, no. Second, the paranormal is not opposed to science. Again, we have touched on this before, but this is even in the assumed definitions that people often give. What is the paranormal? It's that which defies scientific belief. And I find it interesting here to beat that dead horse again, how belief is modified by scientific. So the myth of utter objectivity, of inviolate, perfect, exhaustive knowledge, is already undermined by using that woo-woo term, belief. But I don't think that the paranormal is simply that which defies, which implies an active resistance to, right? Can that happen? You better believe it. But I don't think that an essentialism, where we say, oh, well, okay, so we have scientific belief here, and then that which is not that, and that which doesn't like that, that's the paranormal. I don't think that works, especially given how many of the heavy hitters of disenchantment thought that there was something to various of these phenomena. And third, the paranormal is not unnatural. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that, yes, the things that we call paranormal do not tend to obey the conventional roots of natural law to which we are accustomed. Yep, there's no getting around that. But I think that we derail the entire enterprise if we simply treat the conventional as that which is most real, most legitimate. What I am betting on is that the paranormal is, in fact, a type of, for lack of a better word, the normal. By which I mean, it is a feature of our world. Always has been, and always will be. No, it is not typical, in the sense of, every day I don't open my door and see a Yeti across the street. And similarly, sharks are real creatures on planet Earth. Yes? I hope we don't have any shark truthers out there. But if sharks are real, it doesn't follow that I'm going to run into one anytime I cross the street, right? Whenever I get out of my car, I'm not running the risk of encountering a great white shark. There are conditions of possibility that are woven into everything that exists. So if I was trying to prove to my shark truther friend that sharks were real, side note, I would not be friends with a shark truther. Shark Week is just way too important to me, and it's part of the reason that I am who I am today. So hypothetically, if I was someone else and I had a shark truther friend, and I was trying to prove to him that sharks were real, it's not like I would set up shark bait just anywhere, in the cul-de-sac at the end of the street, and then wait for sharks to arrive. My shark truther friend would not be justified at the end of that experiment when 0 sharks showed up in saying, I told you, there's no sharks, man, wake up. Don't be a sheeple. Don't believe the lies they're telling you. I would say, dude, are you serious right now? Of course no sharks came to the cul-de-sac in southern Wisconsin. Are you serious right now? And I think that a lot of people tend to treat the paranormal in a pretty analogous manner, right? So if you go out at night in a graveyard and you've got a tape recorder and you ask questions, well, if ghosts are real, then we should pick something up, right? Well, I mean, not necessarily, right? If I send someone an email saying, let's meet together at 8 p.m. at this place, my having sent that doesn't guarantee that the person's going to meet me at the location, right? The conditions of possibility come into play there. Is this someone that I'm good friends with? Is this someone who lives reasonably close to me? And the more factors that we add, the more complicated the potential answer becomes for, is this person going to meet me? It's not as simple as, if that person exists, they will of course meet me for dinner at 8 p.m. It's a maybe. So, I think that this applies a little bit. The first thing I'm thinking of is Bloody Mary. Maybe you should be glad for all the times that you said Bloody Mary into a mirror 3 times and she didn't show up. Because you know what? She was probably wrecking someone else's life at that moment. Relatedly, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say, there's got to be a logical explanation for this. which again implies that the dog man that just flipped your car over is not logical, is not bound by the constraints of reason, whatever reason is, right? But see, if you're driving down Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and a 6.5-foot tall werewolf thing grabs hold of the front of your car, gives it a shake, and your car rolls over, the logical explanation is that the beast of Bray Road just did a number on your Honda. The logical is not some substratum where, again, once we start messing around with these weird things, we're leaving reality behind. This also applies to the principle of Occam's razor, where the simplest answer tends to be the correct one. In principle, I agree with that idea. It's just that sometimes I think that the simplest explanation is that there is an entity that is at work doing something that is inexplicable and out of the ordinary. That is sometimes the simplest answer. So, what is it? At very least then, I'm going to have to hazard the working definition that the paranormal is that which exceeds our conventional expectations of the everyday for how things work. That's a little abstract, but I'm also trying to do justice to the broad range of experiences that people have that are referred to as paranormal. It is such a wide field that to immediately become too particular, I fear, would be to screen out the many types of weirdness that regular people, and quite to their embarrassment, claim to have experienced. I've come recently to rely on the word and the concept paranormal to the extent that I have, because one, most people aren't very familiar with the word preternatural, and I think that that can cut it often. I don't like to use the word supernatural because, again, I am going about my ongoing exploration with an approach that incorporates the toolbox of Christian theology. Strictly speaking, according to this understanding then, only God is supernatural. All things, if they are created things, which is what creature means, a created thing. All created things are natural. However weird, bizarre, strange, and off-putting they may be in the views of other creatures within this reticulum of created things, they are all natural because they behave according to the nature that they have. And so, while it is widespread, it's very prevalent to conflate paranormal and supernatural, I want to be more careful with concepts. Created things do what they do. And some of what these things do are very strange to other created things in this gigantic field of activity. And I bet that to a ring-tailed lemur, what human beings do is incalculably bizarre and probably deeply irrational often. Now, part of the question that is woven into this concept is, what is the agency of non-human things? That's a question that we often don't take very seriously. I suspect that James Randi would call that woo-woo also. Perhaps you have at some point, and you think, why would I bother thinking about what these pigeons think about what we're doing? Well, being an ethical being requires you to consider those things. Their agency is not equivalent to or synonymous with ours, but they possess some agency, yes. Now, are there other forces and other entities? Are there not other things that have agency then that impact human existence? And my wager is yes, because most people, for most of history, have thought exactly that. American scholar Jeffrey Kripal says, in effect, that the paranormal is the sacred as it is in transition from a religious register, both individually and collectively, moving from a religious register to a scientific register. And so, in that understanding then, the religious and the paranormal are not at odds with one another. They may just be two sides of one coin. I find that very amenable to the approach that I am taking in all of this. I think it's also borne out in the data, a willingness to consider the possibility of religious claims tends to correlate with the willingness to accept the possibility of the paranormal. Correlation, of course, does not imply causation, but it does indicate something. And I think that that means that there is a common field of activity which is interpreted by different parties, different communities, in these various ways that, in late modernity, will either be classified as religious or as paranormal. Now, in the last video, I tried to graciously take apart the myth of disenchantment. But because I kept stressing the importance and the reality of alienation under late modern capitalism, I am not entirely dismissing the emotional effects of alienation. Alienation, in the sense that I'm referring to, I think correlates with what people refer to as disenchantment. And I think that that alienation does speak to something about us as not just creatures, but as human beings. I think that there is a part of us that longs to find its source outside of itself. And Bob Dylan talks about it. You gotta serve somebody. And David Foster Wallace does in his address, This is Water. We all want that. We are routinely dissatisfied with what is on offer around us. But it is a drive that cannot just be eradicated or snuffed out. At least not without a lot of really brutal effort to overcome. And I think that this alienation also speaks to why so many people who perhaps will say in a poll that they don't believe that these things are real, they love horror movies. They love spooky aesthetics. They love fantasy. They love these things that challenge quotidian interpretations of life and the world. And why is that? I think it is because there is more than what late capitalist modernity and its plausibility structures permit us to believe. That is my bet, that the need arose not out of a kind of juvenile fantasy fulfillment, but in the same way that you need water because you are the kind of creature that needs water to live. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't some really unpleasant versions of this real thing. There definitely are. And so, I am not trying to suggest that our need for something that is more than the ordinary, means that everything that is beyond the ordinary is good and beneficial for us. Quite the opposite. There are things that are diametrically opposed to what we are and what we most want. And so the paranormal is really a grab bag of so many different kinds of phenomena. The paranormal is whatever spooks us out of that kind of sleepwalking through existence feeling that we routinely have in late capitalist modernity. So, given all these considerations, I would say that the paranormal are those discrete experiences, those phenomena that defamiliarize our interpretation of reality as something that is drearily mundane and predictable. I think that this captures the essence that unites all of the weird things that shake people awake out of a narcoleptic existence that is far too common. And again, this is why the story of disenchantment is so attractive to some people. It's because it is a half-truth. It is a half-truth that the paranormal awakens us to the possibility of. It gives us only the faintest of glimmers of something exceeding our horizon as it stands now. And this is why it can be a blessing, or why it can be malevolent. It is good to be shaken out of narcolepsy, but what we are drawn towards is not always beneficial for us, our souls, for our planet, because there are forces that want our good, and there are forces that want most to distort, to degrade, and to destroy us. And that is why there is seriousness that is necessary for exploring these things. I am all for humor and lightheartedness, but there must be earnestness, there must be gravity to this investigation as well. Monster hunters need to take caution, Nietzsche reminded us. He said that those who gaze into the abyss, remember that the abyss gazes back into you. The abyss is always already within us. There is an external aspect to the phenomenon, but there's an internal one that is already there. It's like it's magnetically drawn. We go out because something is already within. And so, I believe that it is worthwhile to probe into and try to understand these things. And yet, there must be caution as well, because we must be disabused of the illusion of mastery, that we stand over above all things, that we are our own masters, that we are capable of such a thing. I think that our experience in everyday life shows that this is not the case. We are too frequently mastered by other things. We too frequently submit our agency to other forces who, again, distort our being, our agency, degrade it, and over time destroy it. So, while that's a bit of a bummer note to end on, I think it's also important to be sober about the implications of what we are looking into. So if this has been beneficial to you, if you have learned something, if your appreciation for these matters has deepened in any way, then please, I ask that you would like this and subscribe and tell others. I want these investigations and these explorations to be something that all manner of people can look into, and yes, will shake them out of some of the stupor I think that many of us feel all too regularly in this world. And also be sure to stay tuned because I am working out the details to camp out overnight on Bray Road. I will be bringing all of my silver accoutrements, believe you me. And leading up to that, I'm also going to try out Randonautica and see what manner of horrifying things await me when I use that app.
I can't believe you've done this.
Oh, Lord. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ian, out.